Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Words Unplugged, where we convert words into conversations. Today, here with me, Erandi Ganepola, a great technologist and a brilliant athlete. Erandi, why don't you give an introduction about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Asanka, and thanks for having me today. So, I'm part of the sales engineering team here at WSO2, and I primarily work with our customers, prospects, and partners, helping them to define their requirements as well as shape their enterprise architectures, and most importantly, help them to adopt WSO2 technologies in their organization journey. Yeah, that's about me.
Great. So I think today's topic is based on an article you wrote recently on architecture diagramming from L0 to LN. So I know the background story, but for the benefit of the audience, why don't you explain why you wrote the architecture, and how did all started?
Yeah, sure. So, I will start from my side of the story. Actually, like I said, the job role I'm playing here. In my job role in day-to-day life, I get the opportunity to work with different customers, partners, prospects, and so on. And not only that, if we take a single organization, inside that organization, I get the opportunity to work with different stakeholders, starting from executives to architects to engineers, DevOps, and so on, right? So, my personal experience, I know this like the same experience of most of the architects. So, these organizations have very complex systems, and eventually they keep adding multiple technologies, multiple components to these complex systems, and it is getting more and more complex. But over the time, when businesses grow and when they want to change things out, and when we try to get a better understanding of what the platform looks like, uh, we eventually end up either getting into a very complex diagram or either getting into a black box. So that is where practically we've seen that we are working with complex systems, but eventually none of them can simplify it and present it to the relevant audience, providing the relevant details. So this is where we, as practicing WSO2, we use L0 to LN methodology, catering to every audience, and we do it as a practice. And I think we adopted it from a concept that Asanka and team built. So we can discuss more about it, and that was the background of for me to write about this because we practice it, and any architect out there can reuse it with their work as well. So, Sanka, you can speak about it more from your perspective, how you initially came up with this concept because we are now practicing it because you introduced it, right?
Yeah, so I think even you got motivated by doing a session at one of the WSO2 conferences. So we discuss in detail. Yeah, to go back to the original idea, I think everything started somewhere around 2009, 2010 timeframe that I worked with one of the architects working for a financial institute, and he asked me to help with defining the architecture. And as part of that exercise, I gave him some architecture documentation. He was happy with the content, but then again, he questioned back and said, "Hey, isn't this too complicated? How can I explain this to other people in the organization?" So that's how everything started. Then I went back to the drawing board and then looked at how we can simplify the diagramming, because as you clearly mentioned, sometimes there's no architecture in the organization. People just build systems, and sometimes there's an architecture but they don't document it. So that's another issue that we see. And then sometimes the architecture is not pragmatic, it's just theoretical, that they put in PowerPoint or they put it in some kind of a diagramming form. It is not relevant for the organization as well as the people who's building systems. Then the complexity, as you highlighted, systems are complicated, and the systems these organizations are building are complicated. So the diagrams that they put naturally becoming complicated as well. And another thing that we have identified, the architecture diagrams are not up to date. Most of the time, those are not updated with the changes happening. And then with the iterative development, iterative architecture, they don't update these documents. So those are the problem statements that came during the initial stage. And then I looked at it, looked at the diagramming. It already exists like things like UML and various other notations, and came up with this concept that we can apply for any notation that start from ground up, and then you can build it to any complexity level that you required by simplifying step by step and take it to the next level. So that is how everything started. And by natural, architects are visual, right? So we need to find a proper way to visually represent these systems. So that's why I took a concept like this and then build it and make it a practice within WSO2 as well as with our customers as well. So I think even you started your even you started your article by explaining different type of notations. Maybe that is something we can little bit go in detail about why this is more important and why architects and architecture is more visual.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So before coming to the notations, maybe I can start with the first section I added to the article itself, right?
Yeah.
So architects, in my opinion, architects were always visual thinkers. For an example, if we take a great architect like Leonardo da Vinci, he invented so many machines or complex systems. And when we are referring to those complex systems today, by referring to their architectural sketches, what is left today? This is like after 500 plus years, right? Still, we can understand the complexity of the machines or the systems he built. So, this is like the beauty or the power of the architecture diagrams. So, we are bringing that kind of notion to the current world, and current world, like you mentioned, the systems are very complex. So, if we simply look at the evolution of the architecture, different frameworks, different notations. So if I put it in a very simplified manner, we can think like we start from sketches, but eventually we these things evolved, and we used flow charts to basically represent the data flows, logical units, and so on. And we used UML kind of notations. And if we take like business processes, if we want to represent it from the business angles, we used again different notation like BPMN and TOGF, these kind of frameworks. And when it comes to C4 kind of models. So these were like very theoretical things. And I would say if we want to communicate a complex system to an audience, first the audience has to understand the notation or the framework itself, because itself is complex. Then, if we have time left or energy left, then only we can understand the actual problem. So that is where I think, yes, we can use all of these notations and frameworks, but that is where the actual problem lies, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation on why it's important to look at it from that angle, and why the diagramming is pretty important for architects and the architecture. So another thing that I really liked in your in your article, you explained clearly the L0 LN is not about different type of architecture styles like business architecture into solutions architecture into deployment architecture. It is about every aspect of, or every different style of architecture can be derived from this L0 to Ln. So that is pretty important because when I introduced this concept, a lot of people thought the business architecture is level 0, solutions architecture is level 1, and the deployment architecture is level 2. But it's not the case. So I think if you can get in detail to that, that will be great because you practice it in your day-to-day architecture work. So it will be a really good thing for the audience to know how you kind of build it from ground up and then explain these different type of architecture styles into different audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I explain the concept first, L0 to L1 is basically about a simplified level-based methodology, right? You start from level 0 and you go deep dive into level by level and in details into level 1. But like you mentioned, Asanka, so there's a misunderstanding like this is across the verticals. It's not the case. So when we are dealing with different audiences or the verticals, we have to deal with business side of folks, and then we have to deal with architects, and then we have to deal with deployment teams like SREs, DevOps. These are different verticals that we have to work with, and in my opinion, they work on their own language, right? If you take a business vertical, these executives are more interested towards the outcome we can bring from business perspective, ROI, the business value we can bring. But if we take solutions architecture or enterprise architecture vertical, their interest is more towards how we can build this entire platform with the correct architectural patterns and so on. Deployment teams interested more towards how they can do the deployment in cloud infrastructure and so on. So when we are catering to these verticals, we can take each and every vertical, and in that vertical, we can start from L0 and then go deep dive into level by level and go up to LN. Maybe I can take a simple, very common example. So let's think it as like a manufacturing company. So it's a very common scenario. So there will be suppliers who are providing raw materials, and there will be orders coming into this manufacturing company, and they do process the orders, they do the financial side of things, and then finally once the orders are processed, when it's done, they will notify the third party vendors such as delivery partners, shipment companies, and so on. So in this kind of a scenario, let's take a one vertical like architectures, enterprise architectures or solutions architectures. So we can start at the L0 level without introducing any technology. We just introduce the components level, how each and every component fit into the picture, and build the entire enterprise architecture diagram at a very high level, L0. And then we can go one step further, and then we can introduce the technologies such as, let's say, in this middle layer, they have to integrate systems like ERPs, databases, right? In that layer, we have to introduce an integration platform. And when we are exposing these services to their partners, these services should go through an API management platform. Then we have to introduce the API layer, and this should be secured. We have to introduce IDP, so identity servers. And as well as we have to connect with third party systems, how these components will connect. So likewise, in the level 2 or level 1 diagram, we can bring these technologies. And then we can dive one step further, and we can introduce the architectural patterns, can introduce microservices, backends, and we can introduce like publisher subscriber model. When the order is processed, we can send events to the third party vendors, shipment companies that order is processed. We can bring that kind of architectural patterns, and we can introduce API styles like REST API styles, GraphQL API styles. So these level of details we can attach to the level 2 architecture diagrams. And then if we want, we can dive deeper into one more step, and maybe we can take a particular domain of this component and dive deeper and explain more details about that domain likewise. So we can start from level 0 and we can go into level N, and these are unlimited, but this is how you would present the architecture into a particular vertical, going deeper and deeper. I hope I explained it and did a
Yeah.
better job.
Yeah, I think it's a great explanation, and it took me about like how everything started and some of the concepts, because um, it's about system thinking and then in a way first principles as well,
Mhm.
because what we are looking at in first principles get in deep into the root of the problem, and then divide the problem into small chunks and then build it from ground up. I think we are doing the same thing here in this architecture style. And then another thing that came to my mind, I don't know whether you noticed, I recently wrote an article about think like an architect, like everybody is an architect, not only technical people, even
Yeah.
sales, marketing, they should think like an architect. Even I wrote something about my barber, like how a barber becomes an architect and they do architecture work. So in that way everybody can benefit out of this if you are looking at it from a system point of view, as well as if you need to apply first principle thinking into a sales motion or a marketing campaign or any other thing that you are doing. So you can kind of visualize the idea and then make it to the next level by using these notations. So I think moving back to your article. So we discuss about a couple of problems, right? There's no architecture, the pragmatic versus theoretical architecture, complexity, and then keep on updating or keep the architecture up to date, those kind of problem statements. So shall we kind of little bit digging deep into the how we can address each one of these problems using L0 to LN architecture style?
Yeah, I think I can talk about it more from a practical aspect as well, because like we explained like we talked in the beginning of this as well. So one key factor that we see day to day when we're working with these customers is they don't see they don't get the simplified version of the complex system. So because of that, one key thing we are lacking is relevant people who can make the decision. They don't understand the importance of what we are trying to do, or how urgent it is, or what are the actual parts that we can expand or scale. So that is missing, that information is missing, and it's hard to convey them in that approach when we present them with a very complex diagram, especially when we are presenting a very complex diagram into a decision maker from the business side, right? So the key benefit that we have seen is because of the simplified manner we explain things using LCD to LN architecture, the things are progressing rapidly. And because they understand the picture, understand the importance, and it's very easy to progress towards a common end goal with this approach. As well as there are other much more benefits like it helps with the fast onboarding, because in large organizations, the people who actually start working on the project, they will not be available after a couple of years, right? So when new one joins to the team, these architecture diagrams, it will help actually in a way of documentation itself. They can easily adapt to them, and easily they can grasp it, as well as iteratively we can develop this, and progressively we can move towards because of the approach we are following here.
Yeah, I think
Any
the complexity is related to the depth you have in that particular problem domain, right? Because
Yeah.
if you have the depth, then you can simplify it. And I think why people are making things complex sometimes, because they don't have the depth, and then they are making it complex for everybody, so nobody can understand and
Mm.
nobody will question. So when you simplify it, then people can understand and people will question about various aspects of that particular solution. So you should be able to answer those questions. So I think to practice this, you need to have that depth in the problem space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of these stuff, like all these problem statements that we listed, can be easily addressed. Like now you have architecture, since the simplicity and the generic nature of the diagramming, you can keep it up to date. And then the most important thing is you can make it relevant for different audiences. Then people will understand what
Mm.
we are really doing. And there's a common problem in the industry, right? The technical groups and business teams are not communicating well enough because business groups cannot understand some of the technical complexities that we have. So I think this kind of an approach will help us to communicate these things across the organization and even get input from end users who will be using these systems and build something, provide more value for the end users rather than we build something that we think it is correct. So that's another advantage that we will get from this kind of an approach by having more outside in approach to the systems that we build.
Yeah.
Cool. I think so. Since we discuss about the problems and how we are addressing these um, this as a solution for those problems. Probably you can explain few examples from your architecture work that you are doing with customers. I can give a few examples as well, but since you are closely working with many customers, you can pick a few examples and describe how this helped you to find a solution for those problems.
Yeah, certainly, Asanka. So I think I can take a very recent example. We have a really good experience from that. Uh, there was a API management customer, one of our very important customers, and they've been with WSO2 for the longest time. And the the to be honest, the platform they built it many years back. And when they were building, I believe they had a very small team, as well as the technologies they used. The technologies those existed those days, right? Even including WSO2 products. But with the time, the people who built the platform, they have left the company, as well as technology stack that itself has evolved and so on. So when we look into it after several years, when the business has expanded their horizons and they want to grow further, they want to scale further, the existing system was like a black box for everyone. And when the top management question about it, no one can, like you correctly mentioned, Asanka, no one could actually explain what is inside and why can't we do this and rather than doing this. Likewise, it became a real good problem, and it that was the moment that WS2 had to step in, basically to get a end-to-end understanding of the system. It was a bit hard, but WS2 could get the end-to-end understanding of the entire platform. Then what we did was we basically built the diagrams from level zero, catering to each and every audience. That's the, I think, key thing we did first, because when we have these diagrams, we can explain clearly what is inside, what is the impact, as well as the criticality or the importance of the job that we are doing there. And then everyone understands that, or then they start questioning, okay, why can't we expand in this side of the business? Why can't we do it rather than this way and this way? Likewise, that is a very good example. We uh, dig deeper into the platform, we build these diagrams, and then we use those diagrams as the references to expand the business and get this communicated in a simplified manner to different audiences, including business stakeholders, architects, and so on. So I think that's what's the most recent example I experienced in this domain. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, and it's common, right? These kind of
Yeah.
situations we find in enterprises. Enterprises are very complex and adaptive systems, so this is a good way to simplify those things. So, my personal experience, I think there are a lot, but if I pick one, when I'm defining the cell-based architecture back in 2018 with our founding CTO Paul Fremantle, then we used the same methodology to define the cell-based architecture and then come up with the diagrams that we have in the architecture specification. Again, like how we build it from ground up, and we had a single cell, multiple cells, cell communication, and then we ended up having an example of what an cellular enterprise looks like. So that even this concept help us to build that as well. So I think that's where we as a company using this, and we encourage our customers to use this methodology to get the benefit of all these concepts that we explain. And I think if you look at it in the future and the current state of enterprise architecture, it is getting day by day complicated with all the agentic systems are coming. Now you have to link the existing systems with new agentic systems that you are building, because we can't build it as we had to build it as part of the enterprise architecture, not outside the enterprise architecture, and a lot of moving components. So this is a good way to look at the future architecture and the current architecture and document it in a way that everybody could understand and then contribute to the architecture exercises.
100%. Yeah.
Okay, I think thank you, Erandi, for joining this conversation, and I'm looking forward to read more articles from you and have similar conversations in the future. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Asanka. Thank you for having me.